Morning, everybody. A landmark report has found the Metropolitan Police to be institutionally racist, sexist and homophobic. The author, Baroness Louise Casey, has warned that the Met can no longer presume that it has the permission of the people of London to police them, and said the force may need to be broken up. Our Home Affairs editor, Jason Farrell, has the story and a warning. His report contains some flash photography from the very beginning.
Londoners, and particularly women, have been failed. This review, born out of the murder of Sarah Everard, found that even the policing of her vigil further damaged confidence. But it also reveals the lack of faith is shared by many officers. One says rape convictions are so bad it may as well be legalised. There are stories of rape tests being ruined because of broken fridges, and a female officer who reported being raped by another officer who was then forced to work with him.
Even as we publish this report, there hasn't been a change across the whole of policing that says anybody that's got domestic abuse on their record, or anybody that has indecent exposure, isn't automatically removed from the ability to be a police officer. So I think
You think they should be?
Of course they should be.
The report finds a bullying culture underpins the Met's problems. It tells of initiation rituals with junior officers urinated on and one sexually assaulted in a shower.
It's ghastly, isn't it? You sit down and read that report and it generates a whole series of emotions. It generates sort of anger, frustration, embarrassment. It generates some pride as well, which may sound odd, but it's our men and women who care about the policing of London who've given most of the evidence for that report to Louise Casey, which is a testament to their commitment.
When police officer Wayne Couzens murdered Sarah Everard, his case prompted the first victim to report serial rapist David Carrick. And one of his victims told us that she was left so traumatised she feared all uniformed police officers.
I would just freeze, stop breathing. In my mind, I was just straight away thinking, they're going to harm me.
What does the police need to do to win back your trust?
I think they need to go through the force and vet every single guy that is working there. Yeah. And even if there was a mention of a minor domestic violence argument, to fully investigate it.
Among many recommendations, the report calls for a new independent team to deal with misconduct cases, end-to-end vetting of police officers during their time in service, and disbanding the Parliamentary and Diplomatic Protection Unit, of which both Couzens and Carrick were members.
It's nearly 25 years since the Macpherson Review found that the police was institutionally racist. Now, not only are they found to be racist, but also misogynistic and homophobic. What is the government going to do about this?
Well, the report is clear that there are systemic and chronic problems with leadership and culture. And what we need to do is change the culture, change the practice, and change the systems in place that are running and regulating the Met. And that depends on the leadership.
Louise Casey says leadership has till now repeatedly failed, and it is leadership she hopes that will in time repair the damage. Jason Farrell, Sky News.
By the Metropolitan Police Chief, and that's Sir Mark Rowley. Hello to you, Sir Mark. Thank you for joining us on the programme this morning. Broken, rotten, institutionally racist, misogynistic and homophobic. How did you sleep last night?
This is a very, very worrying report. I returned to policing after a few years out last September, recognising the challenges we face. And I'm resolved that we will reform policing. And I know the vast majority of my people are. This is a very upsetting read. You can't read this report and not be upset, embarrassed, and humbled by some of what's been said. The one thing that's heartening in it for me, the evidence in this report comes from the men and women in my organisation who care deeply, who want us to do better, who want us to be different. And it's with my resolve and their resolve that we will reform the culture of the Met, and we will do better for the people of London.
Do you accept the full findings of the report?
We accept the findings of the report. As I say, it's deeply worrying.
Sir Mark, do you accept the full findings of the report?
I accept the findings of the report, absolutely.
The full findings of the report?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand the point
You know
you're
exactly
making.
what I mean, Sir Mark. We're
report.
talking about your suggestions that you don't accept that your force is institutionally racist.
I absolutely accept the diagnosis that Louise Casey comes up with. We have racist, misogynist and homophobes in the organisation, and it's not just about individuals. We have systemic failings, management failings and cultural failings. The reason, and I respect Louise using that term, the reason I don't use it, I think it's a very ambiguous term. Your viewers would have different interpretations of what it means.
No,
and
it's very
also become
straightforward.
politicised
I
in
purposefully
debate.
looked it
But
up, Sir Mark. Sir Mark, if I may, I purposefully looked it up in the dictionary this morning. Institutionally means convention or norm in a culture. And that's what Louise Casey thinks is happening in the Met. You tell me why it's not.
So you've proven my point, I'm sorry to say, because the definition you pulled out is not the one that William McPherson used, it's not the one that Louise Casey uses. Everyone uses different definitions. It's pointless arguing about definitions. We have a real problem here. We have misogyny, homophobia and racism in the organisation, and we're going to root it out. I've already grown our capability to do that. We're absolutely determined to take this on. We're removing officers more quickly. We're tackling these issues. And meanwhile, day in and day out, I've got the officers of the force who are coming forward and they are absolutely determined to tackle this. The vast majority are as embarrassed and angered by this as I am, and we want to make a difference.
OK, well, that was certainly the phrase that was used in an English dictionary. If you want to take umbrage at that, I'm not sure whether you do or not, but there we go. Baroness Casey pinned the primary blame on past leadership. You were previously Assistant Commissioner and held very senior roles at the Met between 2011 and 2018. What responsibility do you accept?
I think all of us who've led in policing need to reflect on why we didn't see the scale of this earlier, and I'm certainly doing that. As I say, I've had 4 years out of policing, and I've come back because I'm absolutely determined that we need to tackle this. I think you'll find I've been more outspoken on the need for police reform over the last 6 months than probably any police leader for decades. So we are already putting in place a turnaround plan. We're making big strides already. Louise's recommendations will massively influence our thinking and the plans we have ahead to reform for policing for London, as we strengthen our work in neighbourhoods, as we improve the response to victims, and as we tackle the toxic individuals in the organisation needed removing.
Yeah, it doesn't sound as though you are questioning your position this morning, or considering it.
I came back 6 months ago to tackle these issues, and I've been absolutely clear that that's what's required. And I think Louise Casey has backed the fact that we're up for this.
Well, no, she hasn't. She said that she puts the primary blame at past leadership, and that's you.
She's also spoken about the change in tone that the new leadership has brought in the organisation. We're absolutely determined to deliver the transformation required. That's what I returned policing for, and that's what we're doing. As I say, we're building neighbourhood policing, we're strengthening our response to victims, and we're rooting out these individuals who've undermined us so badly. We're sacking officers at a greater rate, and the information's coming from our own staff who want this to change.
OK, we only have a limited amount of time. 34,000 police officers. How confident can you be that among those ranks there aren't others this morning that are capable of rape and murder of innocent young women on the streets of London?
We are systematically going through,
No, that's not my question, Sir Mark. Please answer my questions if you would.
So,
how confident can you be that you don't have other rapists in your ranks?
I'm doing everything possible to identify if there's any risk of that whatsoever. We're re-vetting all of our officers, we're reviewing all the old cases of allegations against officers. I'm doing everything possible to spot anybody and remove them who poses any risk to the public.
Are there still officers working for you this morning that are guilty of domestic abuse and indecent exposure?
There's one reported in the Daily Mail recently who's guilty of indecent exposure. That's why we're reviewing all of our cases. We're bringing a new vetting method to remove officers who fail vetting. I've been asking the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister for new powers to improve police regulations to make it easier to deal with these issues. We are absolutely determined to tackle the toxic individuals who remain in this organisation who shouldn't be here. There's no doubt about that whatsoever.
So you acknowledge, Sir Mark, there are others. There could very well be others.
There are toxic individuals in this organisation who are in the process of removing now.
OK, who could be responsible for domestic abuse, indecent exposure, perhaps even rape?
I'm not going to get into ifs, buts and maybes. We've got toxic individuals, some of whom who've been involved, who've got concerns about their predatory behaviour. We've got people suspended. We've got people under investigation. We are rooting them out of this organisation.
How many?
I've committed by the end of March to give an update on the work we've been doing on this, and I'll publish that then.
OK, so you can give us an idea at this stage of how many you're looking at?
I'm going to give a full update on that at the end of March. We're working through this work systematically. We've taken,
let me ask you an easier one. Let me ask you an easier one, Sir Mark. Will you disband the Parliamentary and Diplomatic Protection Unit, as suggested by the report? Cousins and Carrick, both members of that.
So the report says we should effectively disband it. We're going to do everything possible to reform and change Parliamentary
you're not going to disband
Protection
it?
Command as much as is possible. I have to protect Parliament tomorrow. I have to protect embassies tomorrow. I can't just take all those officers away and stop doing that. We're going to do everything possible to change the culture in that department, and with the vigour and radicalism that Louise Casey is calling for.
So not following the recommendations of the report, then?
We're absolutely following the recommendations. We've discussed this with...
Louise Casey's saying disband it. You're saying you can't.
She says effectively disband it, so you're not quoting the report correctly. She says effectively disband it. And she wants us to be as radical as we possibly can do in changing it. She absolutely said, I've had this conversation with her face to face. She absolutely understands that we can't break it up overnight and still protect Parliament, but she wants us to be as radical as we can be in changing the culture and changing the people in there. We've already brought in new leadership. At a senior level, half the sergeants are different. We're bringing in lots of new recruits into it to change the culture. There's a lot going on there, and we're going to reflect on Louise's recommendations and see what more we can do.
Yeah, reflect on them, OK. Not necessarily adopt them. As Met Police Commissioner, you have to rely on policing. If I may, Sir Mark, as Metropolitan Police Commissioner, you must rely on policing 9 million Londoners by consent. The report says that Peelian principle is at risk. If that is the case, how can Londoners feel safe with you in charge this morning?
So I have tens of thousands of officers going out day after day. They're out there today protecting Londoners. They're arresting dangerous people, they're protecting the vulnerable, and they're doing a fantastic job. This report is deeply worrying, and you're right. Policing by consent in London has been damaged by recent events. Trust has declined over the last 4 years. That's what we're here to do, to turn that round. Londoners can have absolute confidence that we're here to turn that round and improve the service that they get, which they rightly deserve.
How can they be when you say you don't know whether you've got rapists, murderers, people that abuse women within your ranks, and you can't even talk in more detail about that this morning? We have to wait for yet another report.
I said I'm absolutely clear we're doing everything we possibly can do to look back, because those cases, those awful cases of Cousins and... So those awful cases of Cousins and Carrick, what they show is that our systems have not been strong enough at spotting toxic individuals, dangerous individuals within our ranks. And for that reason, we've taken everyone's details in the organisation and we're working through reviewing them against all the national police databases.
But she blamed past leadership, and that's you, Sir Mark. That's you. You were there at the force for years. That's you. You're the past leadership. You have to accept responsibility for this and fall on your sword. We have gone through all the details of all of our officers and reviewing them against national police databases. We're looking at past allegations to make sure they haven't been badly investigated and we haven't made mistakes and there are people who shouldn't be here. We're working through it systematically so Londoners can be happy that we've looked for every possible risk in the organisation, remove those individuals. We're removing organisations... I'm going to put myself out on a limb and say I don't think many Londoners are going to be very happy with you this morning, sir.
Well, I hope they see that we're absolutely resolved and we're determined to take these issues on that are identified in this report.
OK. I'm going to be talking to your boss a bit later on. Let's see what he has to say. For now, thanks very much indeed for joining us on the programme. I know a difficult day ahead.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hi. Thoughts?
OK. Well, it was one of those press conferences, I think, where everyone's jaw dropped yesterday when Louise Casey just
gave the full details of the review. And it wasn't just the fact that she talked about institutional racism and sexism and homophobia. It was also actually the pressures that she was talking about that the police were under, and particularly how they had failed women in rape cases. And I think the symbol of that was when she talked about fridges, for example, that were broken, that had rape kits in them, that had, sometimes they were so stuffed that it took 3 people to try and shut the door, or the door had to be strapped shut. I think my jaw hit the floor when she said that in one of those fridges there was a lunchbox discovered. In 2022, during the heat wave, one of those fridges broke, and a load of rape cases were ruined by the fact that the rape kits were destroyed. And that's the kind of thing she's talking about when she's talking about the failures. And in a sense, institutional sexism, it's not giving women a real opportunity to get their cases heard in court due to police failings. And also within the force, women having sexist comments still in this day and age, dealing with that kind of thing. And the fact that, and she couldn't quite get over this point, that if someone had exposed themselves on a train, for example, that they could still be a police officer, that was still possible. And she looked at the room and she said, how many of you would have kept your jobs in that situation? And I think the overriding thing for me was that she was feeling the weight of the fact that there had been so many reports into the Metropolitan Police, and this is the point you were touching on there with Mark Rowley, that there hasn't led to change from the Macpherson review all the way back nearly 25 years ago. The fact that that said that the police was institutionally racist, and here was a woman saying it's still racist, but it's also sexist, it's also homophobic. Well, he wouldn't accept the word institutional.
Yeah.
And she
or
made
the
the point.
Definition of it.
Well, she made the point that what she described as hollow promises, fake change, a failure to accept the truth. And what she was really hoping for, and this came across really strongly in the press conference, was please just take this on the chin, accept that these failings exist, and then we can get on. Because if the murder of a woman by a police officer doesn't affect change, then nothing will. Okay. So she is disappointed that Mark Rowley hasn't accepted institutional. I would say, though, that she has said that she does have confidence that he will bring reform. She did think that this new leadership could potentially make a difference, but whether it will make enough...
New old leadership.
New old, yeah, like you make the point, he's been there before. But she had some confidence that there would be change, but what she's calling for is very, very radical. OK,
let's see what happens. For now, thanks very much indeed, Jason. Thank you. Well, throughout the programme today, you have the chance to have your say on our top story this morning. We want to know, how much faith do you have in the Metropolitan Police? Broken, rotten, institutionally racist, misogynistic and homophobic. That's Baroness Casey's verdict in her report into Britain's largest force. You can tweet me if you would like to, at Kay Burley, with your thoughts. Now, Boris Johnson's written defence of Downing Street's parties is due to be published later on today. The committee looking into whether the former Prime Minister misled Parliament is expected to publish a dossier, which it received late yesterday, is what we were told. And tomorrow, Mr Johnson faces a cross-examination by the committee's MPs, which is expected to last up to 5 hours. Full coverage of that will be here on Sky News. More than 100 people have been arrested during a night of protests in Paris against the retirement age rising from 62 to 64. Rubbish bins were set on fire during scuffles with the police. The government narrowly survived 2 no-confidence motions after pushing the unpopular reform through Parliament without a vote by MPs. Let's talk to Mark Harper, should we now, the Transport Secretary representing the government this morning. Lots to talk about. You've had some successes. We'll come to that. First of all, your reaction to this report into the Metropolitan Police.
Well, look, the summary is it's a very shocking and troubling report, and Louise Casey sets out very clearly lots of very specific examples about the things that have gone wrong in the Met and the things that need to be put right. And I know that from the government's point of view, the Home Secretary has made it clear that she backs the Commissioner to make the changes that are necessary. And Louise Casey herself says that all of us in politics should back the Commissioner and his deputy in the changes that they're going to have to make in the Met to make sure it's a police force fit to police London and the national responsibilities
But she
that it has.
criticises previous leadership, and he was part of that previous leadership.
Well, she said in the summary of her report that she believes that the Commissioner and his deputy are capable of making the changes necessary, that they understand the scale of the challenge. She also says that she thinks they'll be successful in making those changes, and she herself backs them to do that, and she wants us to back them as well. And I think that's really important that we do so. They've got a big job of work on their hands.
So he
to
has the
support
government's
them.
full support?
Yes, he does. The Home Secretary's made it clear that the Commissioner has her support in making the changes that are necessary to get the Met into the sort of police force we want to see in London.
Even though Londoners don't?
Well, Londoners at the moment, quite understandably, have lost a lot of confidence because of all of the terrible events that have taken place. So the Commissioner has a very large job of work to do. He was appointed late last year, and the government supports him in the changes that he's going to have to make to get the Met into a fit shape that it needs to be to serve London.
Scale?
Well, look, I think he's going to work on this very quickly. There's already work been in place. The Home Secretary, for example, commissioned a review which is going to report in the not too distant future about...
Loads of these reviews is what my viewers will be saying at home. And, you know, we had one from Macpherson Review 25 years ago, and we're still, according to the police service in London, is still institutional.
Well, look,
a quarter of a century later.
Well, one of the big changes, for example, that's called out in the report is how you get rid of bad officers. And the process at the moment is there's an independent panel. The Commissioner doesn't have the power to dismiss bad officers, and the Home Secretary commissioned an urgent review into what changes need to be made, and that's one of the recommendations in the report from Louise Casey.
Let's talk about RMT union members at Network Rail voted to accept a revised pay offer. Why did it take so long?
Well, I don't know, you'd have to ask the RMT why they took such a long period of time to put it to their members. But look, from the moment I became Transport Secretary last October, I tried to change the tone of the debate we were having with the unions. I met with all of the rail union leaders, and I made sure a fair and reasonable pay offer was put to the unions to put to their staff. Now, I'm really pleased that RMT members that work for Network Rail voted with a 90% turnout. Over three-quarters of them accepted that fair and reasonable pay offer. And now on Network Rail, we've resolved the dispute. What I want to see happen is for the RMT to put what is broadly the same value offer to their members that work on the train operating companies, call off the strikes next week and let their members make a decision about whether they think that's a fair and reasonable pay offer. And then we can resolve the dispute for the RMT members on the rail system entirely for the benefit of passengers.
What was wrong with the tone previous to your tenure?
Well, look, I think talking to the trade unions, I think, is helpful. You'll see that the government overall has been doing that with other trade unions, and I think you get a better outcome, and I'm pleased that we got fair and reasonable offers.
So you acknowledge that the attack was inappropriate previously?
Well, look, when I became Transport Secretary, the Prime Minister gave me certain things to get done. One of them was to try and resolve these disputes. I approach it in the way, my own way about how I want to approach these things. I thought I wanted to change the tone. I wanted to sit down with the trade union leaders, and I wanted to make sure we had a fair and reasonable offer. And their staff have accepted that fair and reasonable offer. I think it's fair for the people that work on the railways. I think it's fair for passengers. Okay. And I think it's fair for the taxpayer.
Let me just underline that, if I may. You tweeted that you were pleased that Network Rail's RMT members have voted to accept the offer, that the government worked hard to facilitate. Grant Shapps, your predecessor, said it was not for the government to intervene.
Well, look, the government, I think, had to facilitate the offer. It was made by Network Rail and the train operating companies. Well, look, your viewers may not realise this, but post-pandemic, all of the train operating companies work on contracts that are set by me. The taxpayer has put a huge amount of support into the...
You have to acknowledge that the government took the wrong tack previously.
Well, look,
and you've managed to get a deal over the line.
I've taken the steps that I took since I became Transport Secretary and set out the changes I thought needed to be made, and I'm pleased that RMT members have voted for that deal. My job is to do what I think is right for the passenger and right for the taxpayer.
The deal could have been done much earlier.
Well, look, I don't think... Speculating about what might have happened in the past, I don't know. Look, I've done what I've done since I became Transport Secretary. I've taken the steps that I thought were necessary. I've changed the tone of the debate. And I think, as far as this dispute's concerned, we've sorted it out on Network Rail.
Not all of it, of course.
I hope we can sort it out on the train operating companies to sort out...
Because there are more strikes planned.
There are on the train operating companies. And I said, I want the RMT to put what is broadly the same deal to their members who work on the train operating companies and ask their members if they want to accept that deal as their members on Network Rail overwhelmingly did yesterday.
So you're hopeful that these strikes on the 30th of March and the 1st of April can be averted?
Well, I hope so. If the RMT are willing to put that deal to their members, they could call the strikes off today, put that deal to their members, and I hope we could then resolve certainly the dispute as far as the RMT is concerned completely.
Two quick questions, if I may. Front of the papers this morning, potholes everywhere. What are you going to do to sort them out?
Well, your viewers will know we spend billions of pounds a year on maintaining the road network, and I was very pleased that the Chancellor found an extra £200 million in the budget, which is being distributed to councils across the country to help deal with potholes. It's a problem particularly at this time of the year, and I want to make sure we continue investing in the road network. We announced our capital spending. We're investing £20 billion in road and rail networks across the country. Well, look, you've got to balance investment in the road network for drivers and bus users, but you've also got to balance it with the interests of the taxpayer, and it's the job of government to get that balance right. I think we have got that balance right, but we want to make sure we keep investing in improving our roads.
Just before I let you go, Northern Ireland, DUP said, not sure about this deal after all, certainly certain aspects of it. The ERG, the European Research Group, I've got a news conference later on. They're likely to reject it as well. What does that mean for the deal now?
Well, look, I think most people accept. In fact, I think even the DUP in their statement yesterday accepted that the Windsor framework, which the Prime Minister negotiated, is a significant improvement on the Northern Ireland Protocol. Got changes, I think, that most people didn't expect the Prime Minister to get. I hope that the DUP in time will accept the deal. They obviously aren't going to support it this week, but I think the vast majority of my colleagues will. It's clearly an improvement. It deals with... Well, I don't know what they're going to do, but look, it's an improvement on where we were before. It solves lots of the practical problems for the people of Northern Ireland. They should be at the centrepiece of this. That's why the Prime Minister negotiated the deal, and I hope that as many members of Parliament as possible will support it when we vote on one aspect of it in the House of Commons tomorrow.
Good to see you. Thanks very
Pleasure.
much for joining
Thank you.
us. Thank you. We'll be looking at the paper review for you in just a moment or two. But first, the White House has called on China's President Xi Jinping to urge Vladimir Putin to end Russia's war in Ukraine as the two meet in Moscow. President Xi is the first world leader to visit the Russian leader since the International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant for him over alleged war crimes in Ukraine. We'll have more on that with Helen Ann in just a moment or two. In fact, let's listen to it now.
We're expecting the two leaders to sit down for more formalised talks today ahead of a state dinner later tonight and potentially even a joint statement to the press as well. We understand that yesterday President Xi and Putin spoke informally for about 4.5 hours. But of course, the eyes of the world will be on these two men for the next couple of days, and particularly on whether they come up with any sort of proposal, any sort of deal that might pertain to that all-important context, the crisis, the war in Ukraine. China, President Xi, has always said that he is going into this meeting as a peacemaker. He wants to be seen as a statesman in this. He says China is one of the only powers that has not got involved, that hasn't supplied arms to either side, and that could broker such a peace deal. The West raised some eyebrows at that, of course, because China has been helping Russia financially and certainly diplomatically as well. And many will look at the last 24 hours and say that the body language, the choreography, the words that have been chosen have been extremely warm and extremely friendly. And in that context, many might ask, can China reasonably still claim to be a neutral party in this? Because remember, President Xi has actually never spoken to President Zelensky of Ukraine, although such a phone call might happen this week. But look, there is a lot at stake, because also any potential proposal of some sort of deal or potentially some sort of ceasefire is unlikely to be acceptable to Ukraine. It's unlikely to be acceptable to the West, and that is because it would likely be on Russia's terms. Because remember, the context to all this is that China and Russia are close friends. They share geography, they share some culture, and crucially, they share a mutual deep distrust of America and the West, and that is the bigger geopolitical context within which this should all be seen.
Three unions representing teachers and school leaders have called on Ofsted to pause inspections, urging the watchdog to reflect on the impact they have on the well-being of staff after the death of a head teacher. Ruth Perry, who was the head of Caversham Primary School in Reading, took her own life in January while waiting for an assessment after a school was downgraded from outstanding to inadequate. Ivor is here with us. What a terrible story, Ivor. Good morning.
Morning, yeah, very tragic this. Ruth Perry was 53, she'd been a teacher for 32 years, worked at this primary school in Reading for 13 years, but took her own life, as you say, in January after this Ofsted inspection. An inspection that saw her school's rating go from outstanding, which is the best, to inadequate, which is the worst of the 4 possible ratings. There will be an inquest to look at the full circumstances around her death later this year, but her family have already said in a statement that they're in no doubt her death was a direct result of that inspection, blaming what they call a fatally flawed system that they want to see overhauled. So from this tragedy, we now have this wider row between schools and the school's watchdog Ofsted, with 3 education unions calling this morning for Ofsted inspections to be paused, suspended this week. I'm not sure that's going to happen at the moment, with Ofsted saying in a statement that they are deeply saddened by Ruth Perry's death, but they haven't addressed unions' demands. The Department for Education have also issued a statement kind of reminding everyone that it is a legal requirement for these inspections to go ahead. So it'll be interesting to hear what Jeff Barton has to say later on the show. He's the head of one of those unions, and you're going to be speaking to him later.
I am, for now. Thanks very much indeed. If you have been affected by this story and want to talk to someone, then there is always the option to be able to do that. Joe at samaritans.org, 116123, 116123. As I said, you can also email them, joe at samaritans.org. Quick look at the weather.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Things will feel more spring-like this week, mild but changeable with showers or longer spells of rain.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Now, London is getting some new residents who could help tackle climate change. We'll be telling you more about those little chaps. The Mayor, Sadiq Khan, has announced plans to reintroduce beavers to West London after 400 years. Paradise Fields in Greenford will be transformed into a wetland to promote a more biodiverse ecosystem. Beavers were once found throughout Britain, but were hunted to extinction in the 16th century. Looking at our top stories for you this morning, a review of the Metropolitan Police has found the force is institutionally racist, sexist and homophobic, and suggested it may need to be split up. President Xi has promoted China as a peacemaker during his first visit actually to Russia since the invasion of Ukraine. And teaching unions have called for Ofsted to pause school inspections after a head teacher took her own life. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is facing a possible Conservative rebellion after the DUP said they would oppose his Brexit deal on Northern Ireland. Earlier on this hour, actually, I spoke to the leader, the commissioner, the boss of the Metropolitan Police. It's been a damning report about his officers. What's he going to do about it? So, Mark, do you accept the full findings of the report?
I accept the findings of the report, absolutely.
The full findings of the report?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand the point you're making.
You know exactly what I mean, Sir Mark. We're talking about your suggestions that you don't accept that your force is institutionally racist.
I absolutely accept the diagnosis that Louise Casey comes up with. We have racists, misogynists and homophobes in the organisation, and it's not just about individuals. We have systemic failings, management failings and cultural failings. The reason, and I respect Louise using that term, the reason I don't use it, I think it's a very ambiguous term. Your viewers would have different interpretations of what it means.
No, it's very straightforward. I purposefully looked it up, Sir Mark. Sir Mark, if I may, I purposefully looked it up in the dictionary this morning. Institutionally means convention or norm in a culture. And that's what Louise Casey thinks is happening in the Met. You tell me why it's not.
So you've proven my point, I'm sorry to say, because the definition you pulled out is not the one that William McPherson used. It's not the one that Louise Casey uses. Everyone uses different definitions. It's pointless arguing about definitions. We have a real problem here. We have misogyny, homophobia and racism in the organisation, and we're going to root it out.
That's what my dictionary said. Now, police in New York have been putting up barricades after Donald Trump called on supporters to protect against what he says is his imminent arrest. A grand jury has been investigating the former president's alleged hush money payment to the porn star Stormy Daniels. James Matthews has more.
The word unprecedented underpins Donald Trump's political career. That won't change if and when he faces criminal charges here. He'll be the first former president to do so. It promises to be quite the spectacle inside and outside the courtroom. The NYPD have been erecting barriers in the streets around here, mindful of the potential for protest, as encouraged by Donald Trump himself. Yesterday, some supporters were out on the street, albeit in small numbers. The potential crime being looked at relates to the adult film actress Stormy Daniels and an alleged affair that Donald Trump had with her. Just days before the 2016 election, which he won, he feared she was going to go public, so his lawyer paid her hush money. That was then falsified when it was put through the books of the Trump Organization. If the indictment is served, Donald Trump will face routine criminal procedure here, complete with fingerprints and mugshot. Quite the come down for the former president plotting a comeback.
So could President Trump be indicted today? Stay tuned to Sky News for more on that. More now, though, on calls from 3 unions representing teachers and school leaders for Ofsted to pause inspections this week, urging the watchdog to reflect on the impact they have on the well-being of staff. Ruth Perry, who was the head at Caversham Primary School in Reading, killed herself in January while waiting for an assessment which gave her school the lowest possible rating. Let's get more on this, should we? Joined now by the General Secretary of the Association of School and College Leaders, Jeff Barton. Hi, Jeff. It's good to see you.
Morning,
as always.
Kay.
Tragic story. But can Ofsted really be held responsible?
I think we have to be really careful about that. So I can talk broadly about Ofsted and school inspection from experience. This case highlights, however, the very high-stakes nature that we've got of inspection, where, you know, if you're a head teacher, for example, you will spend your Sunday night, your Monday night, your Tuesday night, and up to Wednesday lunchtime worrying about whether Ofsted will come in the next day. Not because inspection is a bad thing, but because the consequences of it can be a very bad thing. So, for example, if a school is moved from outstanding to inadequate, like this one that we're hearing about, then your school will be taken over by a trust, and you will worry that you lose your own job. And we're a trade union, we know that people do lose their jobs. It doesn't always happen, but even the fear of that is something I think most parents would think it's out of all proportion. I think what this highlights, this case highlights, is that we are putting too much pressure on the very people in our communities who are looking after our children.
What's the alternative?
I think the alternative is still to have an inspection system. I mean, essentially, you know, taxpayers are paying for state education. So you want an inspection system that comes in and holds a mirror up to the school. The problem is the consequences of reducing something as complex as a school to a single grade. If you're an outstanding school, all kinds of good things will happen to you, all kinds of extra resources will come your way. If you're an inadequate school, as I've said, you worry about that. And in particular, those schools in the most challenging areas that need the best teachers and best leaders to want to go and work in them. Why would you do that if you were afraid of what the consequences might be? And therefore, a really simple thing we could do is to take away the overarching grade. So instead of reducing a school to a single word, why don't we say to parents, here's what the school is distinctively doing well, and here are the things that we as inspectors have talked to the leadership team that they could be doing better, and we will come back and we will call out those schools that aren't good enough and give them extra support. That would seem to me a very humane, very sensible way of running an inspection system, instead of what we've got at the moment, which is oversimplifying something as complex as education to single-word grades.
What if there was more notice that Ofsted inspectors were coming to the school? Would that help?
There's a debate about that. You could, as a parent, say, I don't want the school to have any notice. I just want the inspectors to turn up like a health and safety inspector turning up at a restaurant. On the other hand, that does, for someone like me who represents school leaders, imply a lack of trust. And one of the things that we're talking about with the Department for Education is, should there be a different notice period, at the very least, so that I know that this year I'm not going to be inspected as a school, so that you, as one of my teachers, can focus on the most important stuff, not getting ready for Ofsted inspections, but focusing on becoming a better teacher, marking work, learning how to improve. one of the things we're calling for is, can we have the windows of when inspection are going to happen clearer, in order that we can then take some of the pressure and some of the workload off teachers and head teachers? I think that would be eminently sensible. And I think the call to pause Ofsted is really simply to say, are there some lessons to be learned from this tragic case? Was the quality assurance in place? What happened? Was there a complaint from the school? What did governors say about it? What can we learn about it in this instance? But more broadly, what does the next incarnation of inspection need to look at? Because I think most people would say we have got it out of all proportion.
What role should there be for the union in supporting staff during these challenging times?
Oh, you would pay your subscription to a trade union because you will want support from your union. Now, the reality is, if you phone me today, you're being inspected today, and you phone me saying, I think I've got a bad inspector here, the inspection is all falling apart. What we will say is phone Ofsted, get one of their regional directors, put in a complaint, tell us what happens, and we will then help to try and pick up the pieces. I don't know what happened in the case of Caversham, whether that actually happened. There was certainly some problem with the quality assurance, I think, because the draft report had, at the very least, a pretty crass statement about what had happened to the head teacher. I think Ofsted should answer some questions in terms of, was the quality assurance not in place? But your question, what do we do as a trade union? We're there to help you and to support you as best we can in what is one of the most stressful periods.
Through the whole process?
Through the process as far as we can. But we won't be in the school with you, but we will be on the end of a phone if you need us to support you.
But you'll be there while people are waiting for the report to conclude?
Absolutely right, yeah. That's important.
What do you think happened in this case, then?
So I don't know what
She
happened.
didn't feel that she had the support she needed, obviously.
I don't know. All I would do is to go back to what the Samaritans say of us always being cautious about ascribing one thing as the cause of what might have happened in a suicide. So it is absolutely clear that the pressure and the humiliation that even I, as a seasoned veteran head teacher for 15 years in a big school, if you get a grade saying leadership and management is inadequate, you take that personally. If your school topples from one rating to another, you take that personally. That isn't a fault of Ofsted, it's a fault of us putting too much emphasis on Ofsted. We have to get it back in proportion.
Head teacher? I mean, the clue's in the title. It's your job to make sure that the school runs
It is, but if you're the head of a small primary school and leadership is being called as inadequate because of something which may have been nothing to do with the curriculum, may have been nothing to do with teaching, it may have been something to do with safeguarding and health and safety, none of which is to say those things aren't important, but you can feel nothing but a sense of personal guilt and personal shame around that. Now, what you would hope is that a combination of your governors supporting you, a combination of a better complaints procedure than Ofsted has got at the moment. They acknowledge we need a better complaints procedure because at the moment it feels like Ofsted's word against yours, Ofsted are always the winners on that. But also trade union support. All of those things need to be in place. This, I think, is a wake-up call around how we use inspection. I think we need to get it back into all proportion. And the interesting thing, I'm a member of the Times Education Commission, and the Might of the Times did a huge survey of parents. Parents don't trust the judgments. You know, if you send your child to an outstanding school, but your child's coming home every day and the history teacher never marks the books, you're not going to think that's an outstanding school. You're going to think it's pretty terrible for history. Well, in that case, why don't we take those judgments away and why don't we tell you what the school is doing well and not doing well? And that's what Labour's saying, it's what the Church of England is saying, it's what independent schools are saying, taking away the overall judgment. That, I think, would take some of the pressure off and still do what we want inspection to do, hold a mirror up and tell us how good our schools are.
Good to see you as always. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Thank you. If you have been affected by this story and want to talk to someone, you can call the Samaritans free, 116 123, 116 123, or you can email joe@samaritans.org. Returning now to a major new report which has found the Metropolitan Police is institutionally racist, sexist and homophobic. Testy interview with Sir Mark Rowley about that, who's the Met Commissioner earlier this hour. Let's bring in now former Superintendent Nusrit Mehtab, who quit the force in 2020, alleging racist and sexist discrimination. Hi, how are you? It's good to see you.
Hi, good morning.
How damning is this report from the Met?
Extremely damning. What Baroness Casey has done, she's held a mirror to the workforce. And what they should see, is that they're institutionally racist, misogynistic and homophobic. And it's a police service that's lost its way. Shocking, and it's devastating for the people of London.
She still thinks that Sir Mark Rowley is the best person for the job.
I think under these circumstances, because he's new, he has the will.
He's not new, though, is he? I mean...
No, you're absolutely right, but new in the role of commissioner because he was assistant commissioner. Yes,
yeah.
absolutely. And I actually served under him because he was under specialist operations. To be honest, I didn't have that much dealing with him.
Well, that was a body swerve.
It certainly was. So I would say that he has the will, the determination, but does he have the power? Because they're in special measures. On top of that, they've got all this to sort out, and time will tell. But he needs support, and he needs to have far more powers to be able to do this.
It could be broken up, the Met. Do you think that would be a good idea? Is it just too big?
I think if they don't accept those recommendations and to start to see how it goes...
He's not going to accept that they're institutionally racist.
Yeah, which to me, well, it's not a pick and mix, is it really? It's not negotiable. He either accepts the whole report in its holistic form, and if they don't and Met management do not accept it, then I think the fallback should be that there should be a disbanding of the Met, because you can't pick and choose. It's non-negotiable. Baroness Casey has been there a year looking at data, and the data is devastating. The communities have been telling the Metropolitan Police Service that they're institutionally racist. Women has been saying that they're misogynistic, and now the workforce has told it, and now the data and the evidence. And if you don't accept it, then I think that it should be disbanded.
How does he start to rebuild the force? He's got the support of the Home Secretary. He's got the support of Dominic Raab, the Justice Secretary. I'll hear what the Mayor of London has to say in the next hour. What does he need to do to start to rebuild it? You say to accept the report in full. He told me on the programme this morning he's not going to do that. So what other options are there?
Well, the options are then that they put somebody else into power that does accept it and that's willing to do everything Casey said. It's a disaster from the start, Kate, if you start to pick, if you start to pick and choose and think, I'll take recommendation 1, but actually I won't accept that. For me, as I said, that's non-negotiable. And he has to be convinced to accept it. If he doesn't, then the alternative is that he is removed and somebody else is head of the Metropolitan Police Service that will accept those recommendations and move forward. If that's not possible, then I think an independent body should be brought in to look at it and to dismantle it. It's a big beast, and they do specialisms very well, as we know, in terms of investing money in that. But frontline policing, neighbourhood policing has been neglected. So those are the things that they really do need to invest in. And specialisms need to be hived off. And what needs to happen is local policing. Police should just be focusing on local policing, neighbourhood policing, and they need to put community back at the heart of policing.
OK, it's good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. Thank you.